Hello friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and today we're going to go through 25 anticipated releases from April through June. I like to do these videos quarterly because I want to stay apprised of all of the goodies that are available for me in the future, and I do these videos to let you guys see what is available in the future as well. If I missed any anticipated releases from April to June of 2025 that you guys are just super excited about, please leave them in the comments down below. I know I'm gonna miss a few. Every video that I do like this, I always have a couple that after I film the video I'm like, drats, I should have mentioned that one. But yes, please mention those in the comments. I do have 25 books for you guys today, and they are in three main genres. I have fantasy, sci-fi, and horror for you guys. I also have a subcategory within each of those for blends of each of those genres. So I will put timestamps down below. You guys can kind of jump around to whichever genres you are more interested in. Due to the fact that I have 25 books to get through, my summaries are going to be short and sweet, and we are going to start with the fantasy category. So the first book that I have to talk to you guys about is actually a continuation of a series that I have dearly loved, and that is The Book That Held Her Heart. This is the third and I think final book in the Libraries trilogy by Mark Lawrence. The first book was one of my favorite books of 2023, and that was The Book That Wouldn't Burn. This series has just been absolutely phenomenal. I've enjoyed it every time I am in these worlds. The first book in the series got a 5-star from me. The second book I think got a 4.75, and I just think it's phenomenal. The first one in particular is so immaculately plotted. It's just amazing. In this, you have two main POVs. You have Levira and you have Ivar. And Levira lives out in the dust, which means she is separated from civilization. She's kind of in a desolate community, just trying to make ends meet. Ivar is living in a library. He is trapped in a library with his family and has been for generations, and they are trying to find their way out. Well, because of circumstances that happen, Levira ends up being taken from her village and brought to the city, civilization, and she has to deal with different prejudices in being from the outside, people not trusting her, and has to kind of work her way up to working in this really magical library. There's a whole bunch of schooling and intricacies that go along with the library that she learns along the way, and her and Ivar's paths do cross in a really interesting way, and I just freaking love it. The library is so cool. If you guys have ever read Piranesi, the library in this reminds me of the house that Piranesi was in that book. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I can't wait to see how it wraps up. The second book in the fantasy genre that I want to talk about is Faithbreaker. This is the third and I think also final book in the Fallen Gods trilogy by Hannah Kaner. The first book is God Killer, and I am excited to figure out where this fast-paced fantasy is headed. If you guys haven't heard of God Killer, you follow several characters, but the main character in that first book is called Kessin, and Kessin is a god killer. Her purpose is to go around and destroy gods that have gotten too powerful, because in this realm there are gods of essentially everything. Anything that has ability to help or hinder people has a god that's attached to it, and if it has so many followers or so many people that quote unquote worship this item, those gods can gain power. And sometimes when gods gain power, it can be a bad thing. And so that's why god killers exist. You also have in this world a young girl who has a god who is attached to her, which is a very unusual circumstance. And they are trying to find a way to separate themselves without having to hurt the god. They happen to run into Kessin, and the story ensues. I have had such fun with this series. Even though the books aren't super lengthy, they pack a heck of a punch, and I've just really enjoyed the characters, the world, the politics, the kingdom dynamics that are involved in all of it. It's a wild ride, but it's definitely worth your time to pick it up. The next book I have for you guys is the only middle grade on this list, and it's called Where There Be Monsters. And I don't read a ton of middle grade, but the ones that I have picked up I've dearly loved, so I really need to get better about making myself pick up middle grade, and I just think this one sounds really cute. It says 11-year-old Glory Brown is desperate for an adventure far from her family's quaint, quiet life at the Light Inn. Generations of Browns have been stewards of this humble hotel, which acts as a sanctuary in the stretch of monster-filled land called the Seam. But Glory wants nothing more than to learn how to use her moxie, a special skill that only kids have, and to train to become a spheronaut like her mother, exploring and documenting the perilous depths of the outer sphere. When a mysterious boy named Marcus appears one day on a top-secret mission for the Parliamentarium, a school for aspiring spheronauts, Glory packs up her beloved books and sets off on a once-in-a-lifetime journey that will shuttle her across time and space and reveal new dangers lurking in the world beyond the seams. I think it sounds really cute. It also says that it's for fans of Amari and the Night Brothers, which I have not read, but I've heard a ton of people talk about. So I think that this is a good middle grade to put on my list to maybe get myself back in the mood of picking up some younger books. Next, we have Bury Our Bones in Midnight Soil. This is by V. Schwab, and that's really the main reason that I am excited to pick it up, because I have dearly loved so many of V. Schwab's works. Even the ones that I haven't been completely enamored with, they have still been good books and good reads, and so I would like to give this one a shot. It sounds a little dark. The synopsis to this is also really short. I'm not going to read it to you, but it essentially says we have 3 different timelines that are happening. I think one in the 1500s, one in the 1800s, and then one in the 2000s. And you have 3 different women who are all buried. I'm assuming they are murdered. That's an assumption. It doesn't say anything about murder in the synopsis, but talks about them being buried in the soil. Their stories are entwined, but they grow teeth. And I know it has something to do with vampires. I'm not exactly sure. But I'm excited to see kind of a darker world from V.E. Schwab. I know I've seen that in a couple of places. I did read The Savage Song, which was, well, YA, but it was still a darker world, and I did enjoy it. So yeah, we'll see what this one has in store. Next, we have Seventhblade. I've literally heard no one talk about this book. And on Goodreads, there's only 3 reviews and 5 ratings, so I don't think it's very well known yet, but I'm hoping, if it's as good as its synopsis sounds, that it's just going to blow people out of the water. It does also say that this is for readers of N.K. Jemisin and Rebecca Roanhorse, which those are some pretty big shoes to fill, so I'm trying not to get my hopes up. It's also from an Indigenous author, I believe. This says, after the murder of Tereli's adopted son, the infamous warrior and daughter of the Indigenous Ebenus returns to the colonized city of Seventhblade, ready to tear the streets asunder and search for her son's killer. Terelis must lean into the dangerous power of her inherited sword and ally herself with questionable forces, including the Broken Fangs, an alliance her mother founded. Now fallen into greed and corruption, and the immortal Elarish, a powerful and manipulative deity exiled from the faraway land. Navigating the power shifts in a colonized city on the edge, and contending with the deadly new power emerging from within, Terelis must risk everything to find the answers and the justice she so desperately desires. I think that mother stories can be hit or miss for me, but this sounds like a mother revenge story. It has some gods and maybe some politics also involved, so I'm excited to give it a try. Moving on to fantasy genre blends. The first that I'm going to mention is a continuation of a series, A Drop of Corruption, which is the second book in the Leviathan Shadow series, which started with The Tainted Cup. I absolutely love this Holmesian retelling, or not really retelling, but reimagining. We have 2 characters, a Watson and Holmes character, which are Anna and Den, and they are in a fantasy world where Leviathans come out of the ocean and attack the surrounding cities. So they have engineers in this city that have engineered these gigantic walls that protect the cities, and those engineers are being murdered. That's this first book. So they have to solve this before it can become detrimental to their civilization. So I'm interested to see where the series goes from here, but I just ate up the relationship between Din and Anna, and getting to see these characters again is just going to be amazing. I can't wait. Next, we have a historical fantasy mystery, and this is called The Amalfi Curse, which, first off, this has my attention because I love the Amalfi Coast. I think it's absolutely beautiful. It's one of my favorite places that I've ever visited in the world. And so having a book that is set near or, you know, along with the folklore of the Amalfi is just absolutely incredible. This deals with a essentially haunting, or they don't know if it's a haunting, but it is someone who is an archaeologist and specifically an archaeologist on the sea, and she comes to the Amalfi Coast to look at some sunken ships. So you have shipwrecks as well, and trying to look for some sunken treasure. But she's also on a quest because her dad used to dive in this area, and on his last dive he found a hidden treasure that he told her about, and so she is in search of this treasure as well. But since she's gotten there to the Amalfi Coast, she realizes that some bad things have started to happen, and they're wondering if it's just fate or if there are some nefarious things at play. Next, we have a romantasy. I am going to try and pick up a couple of romantasies in 2025 to try and find something that tickles my fancy. It's a genre that I don't have very good luck in, so I'm hoping that I've picked a couple of winners. This one is called This Monster of Mine, and it's about a girl who 4 years ago had an attempt on her life, and they went through the court system, tried to seek justice. Nothing was done, and so she is now seeking revenge. She believes that she knows who her attempted murderer is, and it happens to be, I don't know if he's a lawyer or a justice, some form of a person who upholds the law, who has a magical ability to detect lies, and she decides to put herself in a position where she is working with him. So she works with this person to solve crimes, and along the way, I think she ends up falling for him. That's my thought process, since it is a romantasy. But I'm intrigued with this power of detecting lies and the fact that she is working with him under the false pretenses. She's essentially trying to ruin him while she's working with him on solving these other mysteries. So I'm excited to see where it goes. I always like stories involving law and seeing how authors take, how they manipulate law and make their own laws depending on what type of magical beings exist. And so I'm hoping that this book does that as well. Next, we have a historical fantasy that is also in the humorous subcategory, which those can be hit or miss for me. So we'll see. But this one's called Anima Rising. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but on this you have an artist who is in Vienna, I believe, and he is standing next to the canal, sees a body essentially floating in the canal, but instead of calling the police, decides to draw a portrait of this woman as she is laying headfirst in the canal, and she starts coughing and moving, and he realizes that she is alive, and he takes her back to his flat, helps her, tries to, make her comfortable, and they very shortly realize that she does not remember anything. So he gives her a name, he calls her Judith, and he enlists the help of Sigmund Freud. So this says, with a little help from Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, Judith recalls being stranded in the Arctic 100 years ago, locked in a crate by a man named Victor Frankenstein and visiting the underworld. So how did she get here? And why are so many people chasing her, including Jeff, the giant croissant-eating devil dog of the North? I'm intrigued. There's a lot of things happening in this synopsis. And so once again, since it is supposed to be humorous, this could be a good thing. It could also be a little bit on the absurd side, which I don't enjoy. So we'll find out, but I do think it sounds interesting. Next, we have the second romantasy that I was talking about, which is The Night and the Moth. This is by Rachel Gillig, who is the same author of One Dark Window, I believe, which I haven't read, but I've heard excellent things about. And so I just want to give her writing a try. This also just sounds interesting. It says this is a gothic, miscloaked tale of a prophetess who is forced beyond the safety of her cloister on an impossible quest to defeat the gods with one knight whose future is beyond her sight. So she dreams the future and can get sight from these 6 magical beings in her world. And this knight, who is a heretic, comes to their cloister, and people start dying after the knight has left. Like, I think they dismiss the knight or something because of the fact that he's rude. And the people, the diviners, I think is what they call them, that live in this cloister start dying after he leaves. And so she seeks him out to try and help. The fact that she can't see his future is interesting to me. I'm curious to find out more about her abilities. Next, we have another historical fantasy, and this one is from H.G. Parry, which I have just absolutely loved in the past. This is called A Far Better Thing. In The Scholar and the Last Fairy Door, H.G. Parry took the historical elements of World War II and mixed them with Fae, and I just thought that was fantastic, and it sounds like that's what's happening in this as well. This says, H.G. Parry's A Far Better Thing is a standalone portal fantasy where Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell meets a tale of two cities in a heartrending fantasy of fairy revenge set in the French Revolution. So we have that mixing of history with fantasy, which I do enjoy. And I've liked H.G. Parry's thought process and development of fairy worlds too. So I'm curious to see this in a different book. Next, we're moving on to sci-fi, and the first book that I have for you guys is The Last Chance to Save the World, which is the third book in a series that I've been reading, and I can't remember the series name, but the first book is Full Speed to a Crash Landing. In this book, you follow a main character who at the very beginning of the book, you are in her ship with her, and she is shipwrecked out in the middle of space. She's floating around. She has put out an SOS symbol or signal, and she has just a little bit of oxygen left, and it's running out quickly. And luckily a ship does pass by, does collect her, and they realize that they were both headed in the same direction, or she was headed from the direction that they were going. She had been salvaging from a shipwreck that had happened on a nearby planet, and that is where this ship is headed. And you know from being in her inner monologue that something is not right. She's not quite telling them the whole truth, even though she's telling them as much of it as she can. And you're trying to figure out why. Also, along with that, you're seeing the ship dynamics, the family dynamics of living in a ship together and being on a mission together. You try and figure out why they are on this mission, why this is so important, why things are so secretive. It's very interesting. It's really fast-paced and fun, and they are little short novellas. I've read the first one. I need to read the second one soon, and then it looks like the third one is coming out. Next, we have Awake in the Floating City, and this one, I think, has a chance to be one that I would get bored with or one that I would absolutely love, just depending on how the story goes with the characters. We have an artist and we have a 130-year-old woman that are staying in the sunken city of San Francisco. So this is set on Earth in the future where the Earth has flooded and there are only a few people left in the city because obviously in a flooded city there isn't a lot of resources to sustain a large population. And this artist has lost a lot of people in the floods and things that have happened in the city, and she is trying to figure out whether or not she wants to stay. And when she has made the decision to leave, she gets a note slid underneath her door from this 130-year-old woman who lives next door asking her to stay and care for her. And she decides to stay. And it's their story, I think, of friendship and probably of loss and grief as well. I think that this could be a beautiful story. I'm interested to see where the author takes it. Next, we have The Two Lies of Faven, Sythe. And this is by Megan O'Keefe, who I enjoyed the first book in, I think it's called These Burning Stars. Oh, I don't remember, but I'll put up the picture of the book here up on the screen. I enjoyed the first book in this series, but I did not enjoy where the book went from here. But the one that I'm getting ready to talk about, which is the Two Lives of Faven, Sythe, is a standalone. So I don't have to worry about it going in a direction that I don't enjoy. So I do want to read more by Megan O'Keefe, and I think this is a good place to start. This says, a search for a missing person uncovers a galaxy-spanning conspiracy in this thrilling standalone space opera. The Black Celeste is a ghost story, a once legendary spaceship collecting dust in a cosmic graveyard known as the Clutch. Only famed pirate Bitter Amandine knows better, and she'll do everything she can to never go near it again, no matter the cost. Faven Sythe is a Christborn, a member of near-human species tasked with charting star paths from station to station. She's trained to be a navigator her entire life, but when her mentor disappears, leaving a mysterious star path terminating in the Clutch, she's determined to find out the truth, and only Amandine has the answers. Anything with a space graveyard and a ghost story, yes. Sign me up, please. Speaking of ghost stories in space, the next thing I'm going to move on to is Sci-Fi Blends. And the first one is a sci-fi horror called Overgrowth. This is by Mira Grant, who is the same author as Seanan McGuire, and which I recently have enjoyed the Wayward Children series, but I've never read a horror by Mira Grant, and I would like to. In this, you have a 3-year-old girl named Anastasia Miller, and she's been telling everyone since she was little, and anyone who would listen, that she is an alien disguised as a human, and that the armada that left her on Earth is coming for her. No one listened to her, and now there is an alien ship in the sky, and they realize that they've been warned and haven't actually done anything to prepare. I don't know what that means. I don't know why there's a 3-year-old girl on Earth or what she's going to do now that her family has come to rescue her, but I guess we'll find out. Next, another sci-fi horror with Cold Eternity, and this is an S.A. Barnes, which I have loved in S.A. Barnes in the past with Dead Silence, and I really didn't enjoy Ghost Station, so I'm hoping that this one will go back to me really enjoying it. And really in both books, I enjoyed the atmosphere that this author was able to create within space, and so I'm hoping that that will happen again. With this, you have a person whose name is Haley, and she is on the run for reasons, I think political reasons maybe, and she decides, which I don't know why, she decides to hide out on a ship that has cryogenically frozen wealthy people from Earth on it. And she realizes that the system is long past when it should have been like revitalized or whatever, and so everyone should be dead. But she starts hearing noises and stuff on the ship and realizes that she might have locked her in with something more nefarious than what she was running from in the first place. So it sounds creepy. I'm here for it. Next, we have a sci-fi mystery with the Memory Collectors. I'm not quite sure where the mystery comes into play within this. I just know that that's one of the buckets that it has in Goodreads, but you have a society where time travel is possible, and specifically they can send people back to the moments in time that are like pivotal to them. And you have 4 individuals that you're following in this story. Each one, their lives are changed by different circumstances. One of them, I believe he loses, I don't know if it's his wife or his girlfriend. Another makes a really horrible decision, which you don't know what it is, and she wants to go back and live in a time when she didn't have regrets. You also have someone who is disabled and going back to a time when he wasn't disabled. And then I can't remember what the 4th scenario was, but essentially they all go back in time to the place where their lives changed and live in that moment. And they're only supposed to be there for an hour, but they seem to get stuck there. And I don't know what ensues. I don't know if that means the future is changing or what's going to happen. So once again, I don't know what the mystery component is. I don't know if maybe someone forcefully broke the system to keep all of these people in that location in time. I'm not sure. Next, we have another sci-fi horror with Shroud. This one's by Adrian Tchaikovsky, and as you guys know, I have been trying to get more into his works, and I think this sounds intriguing. So this said, they looked into the darkness, and the darkness looked back. New planets are fair game to asset strippers and interplanetary opportunists. And a commercial mission to a distant star system discovers a moon that is pitch black but alive with radioactivity. It's high gravity, high pressure, 0 oxygen, not great for human life, but ripe for exploitation. They name it Shroud. Under no circumstances should a human end up on Shroud's inhospitable surface, except a catastrophic accident sees Juna and May doing just that. Forced to stage an emergency landing in a small, barely adequate vehicle, they are unable to contact their ship, and they are running out of time. What follows is a grueling journey across land and sea and air. During this time, Juna and May begin to understand Shroud's dominant species. It also begins to understand them. An alien encounter is always interesting to learn about. Where the author is going to go with it, I'm curious, so I'll find out. Next, we have a sci-fi fantasy, and this one is from the same author of The Measure, which I haven't read, but I've heard good things about. This is called The Poppy Fields, and I'm just interested in the concept. This says, welcome to the poppy fields, where there's hope for even the most battered hearts to heal. Here, in a remote stretch of California desert, lies an experimental and controversial treatment center that allows those suffering from heartache of loss to sleep through their pain and keep on sleeping. After patients wake from this prolonged state of slumber, they will finally be healed, but only if they're willing to accept the potentially shadowy side effects. I know that with the measure, it was definitely like an experiment on the human condition and what humans do in certain circumstances. And I kind of feel like this has the same vibe to it. And I'm intrigued to see what happens with these characters. And I also love a grief storyline. And so the fact that this is centered around heartache and loss and what people will go to avoid pain and also to heal from it, I think could be an amazing story. Next, we have a sci-fi fantasy horror, and this could be absolutely fantastic if they pull it off. This is called Of Monsters and Mainframes, and this mixes some of my favorite gothic creatures in with sci-fi and fantasy, and I'm ready for it. So we have a shuttle, seems to be a sentient shuttle, whose job is to transport humans maybe from planet to planet. Yeah, it says between Earth and Alpha Centauri, wherever that is. But the problem is, as this thing, this ship, which calls itself Demeter, is transporting humans from Earth to Alpha Centauri, the humans keep dying. And she finds out, I think, I'm almost positive the ship calls itself a she, but she finds out that the cause of these human murders is Dracula. And she decides to go out for vengeance and go after Dracula. I don't know what that means. I don't know what this is going to look like. I think it's a weird concept, but if it does all the right things, I think it could be really fun. Our next genre is horror, and who best to start out this category than a Nat Cassidy, which I didn't even realize was coming out this year. This is called When the Wolf Comes Home, and I haven't read the synopsis yet, so we're going to find out together what this is about. One night, Jess, a struggling actress, finds a 5-year-old runaway hiding in the bushes outside of her apartment. After a violent, bloody encounter with the boy's father, she and the boy find themselves running for their lives. As they attempt to evade the boy's increasingly desperate father, horrifying incidents of butchery follow them. At first, Jess thinks that she understands what they're up against, but she's about to learn that there's more to these surreal and grisly events than she could ever imagine. I don't know, because it has wolf in the title, I'm assuming it has something to do with werewolves, but it could not be, and it's Nat Cassidy, so I'm here for it. Next we have Bochica. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but this is a Latin American haunted house story, which I'm excited about. You are following a family originally that starts staying in this home, and they have horrible dreams. The mother ends up having a fatal fall, and it affects the father to the point where he tries to burn down the home with the daughter inside. And then years later, this house is converted into a luxury hotel, and the daughter comes back and has some disturbing dreams and gets some messages from her late mother, it seems. I don't know if those messages are in the dreams. It says cryptic journal entries, so I don't know if she's maybe found an old journal. I'm not sure. This says, as Antonia confronts her fragmented memories and the dark history of the estate, she wrestles with the unsettling question she can no longer keep quiet. Was her mother's death by her own hands, or was it by someone else's? So I'm here for a haunted house story, especially one that has such history, and it's got like the same person coming back to that facility years later to see what's happening. I don't know, we'll see how this one goes. Next, we do have some horror blends, and this first one is a horror mystery. It's called Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zing. I'll give you just a brief synopsis of what the story is about. This says, a woman is haunted by inner trauma, hungry ghosts, and a serial killer as she confronts the brutal violence experienced by East Asians during the pandemic. So she is a crime scene cleaner, and she has to deal with obviously cleaning up really brutal, horrible crimes and suicides. And so she deals with that. But she also has some trauma that has happened within her own family, the death of a relative, by someone pushing her in front of a train. It sounds like she starts not understanding what's real and what's not real, and then someone starts leaving like bat carcasses for her at crime scenes, and all of the crime scenes that she's cleaning up seem to be connected to East Asian women. And so yeah, I think there's a mystery ensuing. I also think that you might have a little bit of an unreliable narrator depending on how the author writes this woman's trauma. So we'll see. Next, I have another horror mystery with The Staircase in the Woods. The synopsis says, 5 high school friends are bonded together by an oath to protect one another no matter what. Then on a camping trip in the middle of the forest, they find a mysterious staircase to nowhere. One friend walks up and never comes back down, and then the staircase disappears. 20 years later, the staircase has reappeared, and now the group returns to find the lost boy and what lies beyond the staircase in the woods. So pretty general synopsis, but I like the fact that we have a creepy wood setting. I like the fact that we have almost like a Jumanji-esque, where we're coming back to something 20 years later to see what has happened to this person who has potentially lived in another world for 20 years. I think it sounds creepy. Lastly, I have another horror mystery for you guys. This one is called We Live Here Now, and I think it sounds like something that could potentially be an unreliable narrator, which I do enjoy. It says, after an incident that nearly kills her, Emily and her husband, Freddie, move from London to a beautiful Dartmoor country house in Larkin Lodge. The house is gorgeous, striking, and to Emily, something about it feels deeply wrong. Old boards creak at night, fires extinguish, and books fall from the shelves. All of it stemming from a terrible presence she feels in the 3rd floor room. But these things happen only when Emily is alone. So are they happening at all? So I think that that's one of my favorite premises, especially in a horror novel, is someone who doesn't know if they are seeing something correctly or if there's something wrong with them. Like, is what I'm seeing reality, or is my brain playing tricks on me? So I know that it does take, I will say that it's not always written well. But it is, when it is written well, it's one of my favorite things in stories. So those are the 25 books that I am anticipating from April through June. Once again, if I left one off, please put it in the comments down below so I can add more to my TBR. I always love chatting with you guys. If you aren't feeling chatty today, but you still want to let me know that you're here, just leave a little house emoji for a haunted house, because there seem to be a lot of those in this list. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!